Welcome to LFR on LNK. I'm your host, Dale Johnson. Thanks for taking time to watch us here today. Every month we take you into the public safety world of Lincoln Fire and Rescue. More firefighters die by suicide than by the dangers of their job. A study by the Journal of Emergency Medical Services found first responders attempt suicide at a rate 10 times that of the general public. We'll be giving out some suicide helplines. You'll be seeing some numbers at the bottom of your screen through the course of this conversation, and especially toward the end of this conversation. So make a note of that. We talk about stress. We talk about mental health today with Brent Jones. Brent is with Lincoln Fire and Rescue, firefighter, paramedic. And LFR Captain Nancy Christ. Nancy wears many hats. She's on this show quite a bit. And today she is the LFR Mental Wellness Coordinator. She has that hat on. So welcome, Brent. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brent, 4 years or so ago, you sat right here on this very set talking about your issue, your PTSD, as one of the first patients to get mental help in a new facility in Maryland. And I had to ask Nancy if you were the first patient from LFR or if you were the first patient of the Center of Excellence. And you were the first patient in the Center of Excellence in Maryland. How are you doing today?
Today I am living a completely different life than I was prior to going to the Center of Excellence. I've got a lot more friends on the job. I've got better ties with my family. Life is great.
Nancy, isn't that great to hear?
Yeah, absolutely.
It truly
Absolutely.
is. Because it doesn't always end that way for people in both of your professions. As a matter of fact, you had 5 friends in the recent past that took their own lives.
Unfortunately, yeah, and that's the reality of it is, in this line of work, everybody's not everybody, but most people have an alpha personality, and it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to say, hey, I'm struggling, I need some help. And unfortunately, I've had friends that didn't ask and ultimately, took their own lives.
You talk about being in an alpha profession, you're in a sort of a macho, even for the females that are
Absolutely.
a member of the LFR. There's a bravado, there has to be. In radio, you have to have an ego, you do. It needs to be controlled, but you have to have one in order to be successful. And you have to be strong within yourself to be successful at LFR. Talk about the tweet, Brent, if you would, that changed your life.
So I was basically in I would say, looking back now, I was in a mental health crisis. I was self-medicating pretty strongly with alcohol every day that I wasn't at work, like severely. And then I kind of realized there were signs that I needed to get some help, but I didn't know where to look. I didn't know where to go. Like, I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't want to go get alcohol treatment, but I was self-medicating for nightmares and flashbacks and just gross stuff. And once I decided I was going to get some help, and I was searching, the very day that I was searching for help, I got a tweet showed up in my Twitter feed from the IFF, the International Association of Firefighters, for this coming facility, the Center of Excellence. And there was this big ad, and I can still picture the ad. I still see it. Like, I remember reading it. It's like, let us help you with your PTSD and co-occurring, problems, alcohol and whatever else the case may be. And I thought, well, that showed up for a reason.
It was a sign.
It was a sign, because I didn't know where to go. I had no idea. They had, graciously, the city, the fire department, had sent me to see our local, employee assistance people. But we're not normal, in this profession, we're not normal people. We're not, in my opinion, we see things that people don't see, and it's tough to understand what I've seen through my eyes. And immediately they wanted me to get alcohol treatment. Like, you have an alcohol problem. I said, I don't have an alcohol problem. I've got a brain problem. Like, I need help with my brain. So when I came back to work from that, I was like, I don't know where to go. I don't know where to look. at the time we had IROs, we had resource officers, and I happened to be at a different station than I was normally at with one of those IROs. And I said, you know, like I just kind of broke down. Like, so that's what started the whole EAP thing. So when I got back, you know, I was just kind of like discouraged and thinking, well, what am I going to do? What, like, where do I go? Like, do I need to check myself into like the mental health ward at Bryan West? Do I need to, is that what I need? And then that tweet showed up, and I made a phone call and nobody answered. Like, legitimately nobody answered the phone. I don't know why.
Brent's mentioning IROs. There are PSOs.
So,
now, do those exist?
It used
5
to
years
be
ago?
called internal resource officers.
Okay.
We have changed the
Yeah.
name of those support folks to peer support officers because
Yeah.
we really want to emphasize the peer support. You know, coming
Yeah.
to your friends, you know, across the rig from you and saying, hey, you know, I need some help. So.
And how did Maryland help? How did that Center of Excellence help you?
So when I got there, you know, it was a scary process. I was the first firefighter in the country to go to this facility. I was there alone. So I was kind of like their guinea pig. It was every counselor and medical professional at the center was like, oh, I got to get my hands on this. So like every interview I did, it was triple the amount of people because I was the only one there and they were trying to learn. And, you know, it's kind of discouraging because, you know, you're alone and you're scared and you don't know what to expect and you don't know what's going to happen. And as more firefighters showed up, it wasn't necessarily the staff at the facility, but it's knowing that there's other people that are exactly like you. Everybody that I was there with has the same story. It's, I saw this, or I was part of this, and I did this, and then I can't sleep, and I can't eat, and my personal relationships are failing, and it's the same story. And everybody had the same story. So to know that you weren't alone, like, hey, this is really legitimate. And then obviously the classes that we got to go through and learning how to process the traumas that were stuck, because that's what it is, you get stuck. And once I processed the main cause of my problem, it was like a switch was flipped, and all of a sudden life just made sense to me again. It was like, oh, well, that makes sense. I dealt with what I needed to deal with, and then it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. So that happened about 14 days in. So I was at the facility for 30 days total, and the first couple days I was detoxing, if you will, you know, just making sure everything was out of my system alcohol-wise. And then we started classes, and that was the 14th day, like in the morning.
It
And
clicked.
it was just like somebody flipped a switch, and all of a sudden, I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried, and I slept for the first time unaided with any drugs or alcohol, because they were giving us like trazodone to help us sleep at the center, you know. But I didn't take any prescribed drugs or any alcohol that night, and I slept for 8 hours for the first time in probably 2 years.
Somewhere in my life along the way, it was embedded in me. I don't know from where it came, but to ask for help is a sign of weakness. Maybe it was my stubborn Swedish rural farm, hardworking parents, but somewhere, and thank goodness I've got a wife that's helping me with that, because asking for help is actually a sign of strength instead of a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. And you know, really we call it vulnerability. You know, to allow yourself to be vulnerable and tell your true story, like Brent did, is when the help begins. That's when the healing begins. And you know, you're exactly right. To be vulnerable is strength.
Scary.
And relinquishing that stigma of, I've got to be strong all the time. You know what? Everybody experiences bad trauma calls differently. It depends on what you come to the job with. It depends on your own path, and we all have a different one. So to say that a trauma should affect everyone the same is not true. It may really, really profoundly affect you, and you're trying to figure out why the person next to you is not affected the same. And it's because we come from different backgrounds.
Brent said he really didn't know where to go. That's different today within LFR. So talk about then and now.
So like we mentioned before, we've always had the program. We've had the program for several years, but the program was really designed to get people aligned with our city EAP. And our city EAP has a lot of great things that they offer, a lot of great counseling for kids and couples counseling and even drug and alcohol, getting you to the right resources. But what we were finding was that they didn't have anybody that really specialized in trauma, somebody that really would be boots on the ground with us. And so we set out to try to create a culturally competent list of individuals and centers that we could send our folks to get them specific first responder trauma treatment. And so that's really what we've done, is just create that list. And we're not counselors. We are just facilitators of the people that really know trauma and know how to treat trauma. So.
And you are a peer support officer.
I am.
Right?
Yep.
You and your husband both are.
Mm-hmm.
And there are
We
a
are.
number of them, a dozen or so,
Yep.
more than a dozen?
Yeah, there's 13, I believe, right now. And we're looking to add more. We find that if we have people that represent all areas of the job, it's more likely that people will find someone that they feel like they can relate to. And if not, hopefully they tell a captain or they tell a battalion chief that they're having trouble. But we're looking to add some of our youngins. We have a different generation coming into the fire service now, and they see and feel things differently. They're actually more open to the idea of being vulnerable. But to represent all of those different walks of the fire department is really the clear.
And the subject comes up right away because new recruits have a PSO assigned, correct?
Yep.
And
So,
then there's also hours of training through the course.
So when they first become recruits, we pair them with a peer support officer, and that's really just an individual that they can vent things out about the academy that you can't really go to your instructor and talk about, some of the personal struggles or even struggles within the academy. And then they're able to call anytime, and then we visit them throughout the academy. But then, we do 3 hours of mental wellness education right in the recruit class. Just the foundation of vulnerability, let that down, But what I found is in instructing these younger generations, they're like, oh yeah, I have a counselor. I see a counselor, once a month. Oh well, yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I take an ADHD med. They're just more open to share that kind of thing. We also, Dale, do a pretty intense psychological eval within the hiring process. So people go through an interview with a psychologist before they're ever even hired. So,
Would it have been helpful for you as a recruit coming in? Because in my mind at Brett, some days could be nasty for you as a firefighter paramedic, and other days are more typical and less dramatic. A couple of questions here. Does PTSD build up, or is it you see a situation and all of a sudden you're a different person?
It happens both ways. Honestly, it can happen, a culmination of things, like you could have a call that you don't know that has caused you problems, and then it just builds from there because you don't ever process it properly. So then as it's going and you're just adding and adding and adding. And some people, one call and they know that's it, and it's almost, not necessarily immediately, but it's very obvious that's what had happened. So as far as had we done that in the academy when I started in 2011, I don't know, it was a different culture in the fire service.
Because here's my thinking, as a recruit, you don't know what trauma is. I mean,
Right.
you do, it's on the pages of your study material, but until you walk into a traumatic experience, you really don't get the emotion. Am I right?
You are correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't, it's kind of funny, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, that's.
and because of your experiences, trauma reaches you a little different. You know, you may not be affected by the trauma of a teenager. You might have a teenager at home and be affected by the trauma of a teenager. So it really is so person specific to what really is going to happen. And that cumulative effect of injury is a huge one that's being studied now. And we like to call it PTSI versus PTSD. We call it post-traumatic stress injury. And, you know, and it makes more sense, I believe, because then you think about it as, okay, you had a knee injury and you couldn't work. You went to the doctor and you had a scope on your knee. The brain is no different. You know, you have an injury to your brain, you need to see a professional to help you manage that injury to your brain. So,
How about your colleagues, the men and women you're working with, in terms of either accepting and or asking questions?
So a lot, 99% of my colleagues on Lincoln Fire are very accepting of me and my struggles. And, you know, sometimes people joke around about, oh, that gave me PTSD. And I'll be in the rig and then they'll stop. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, I'm good. Like, joke around about it. At least you're talking about it. Mm-hmm. I lost friends. I lost friends when I came home that either didn't want to accept that I was changing my life for the better. And these are fire service friends that, you know, probably are suffering like I am and just don't want to get help. And
But the reason I ask about your colleagues too is the fact you work with a team. The team is only as strong as its weakest link, and you don't want to be considered the weakest link. You're just as strong,
right,
given from where you've came as they are, not having gone through this.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if that vibe ever came back.
That vibe has never come up on this job and with Lincoln Fire. I've never had anybody treat me differently or like I'm the weak link. You know, being the firefighter paramedic on medical calls, you're in charge of the call. I mean, the captain's not in charge. The firefighter paramedic's in charge of directing patient care, and nobody ever questioned whether I was making the right decision or even hesitated to do what I asked them to do on a call.
Let's just realize what that says about LFR, Nancy. That's a big kudos to the men and women on LFR, because they want everyone to be strong,
Right.
in a healthy way, right?
yeah. You know, and you're exactly right. You know, what we have found in the last 5 years is that everybody's on board. It used to be kind of like, I mean, we'll go through this because we need to check the box. Now, you know, I get calls all day long, every day, from battalion chiefs or company officers. Hey, I have a situation. I'm not sure how to handle it. And that's good. They're reaching out. They're asking the questions. If there's a diffusing that needs to happen after a really, really traumatic call, I'm getting the phone calls. The chiefs are calling and saying, hey, we need you. That's huge. That's all we need.
Mm-hmm. And I like the fact it's starting at the very beginning with the recruits. They're introduced to it. It doesn't just all of a sudden they get a knock on their bunk one day and
Right.
say, the doc wants to
Hey,
see you.
surprise.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I made a video. I don't know if it still showed in the recruit class. Right when I got back, Nancy asked me to sit down and basically tell my story so she could show it to the recruits. And I just sat down and told the story from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And I've had some of the newer recruits come up, like just run into me and introduce themselves and then say, hey, we watched your video in the academy or whatever. And I'm like, you know, I tell them all, if you need to talk to somebody, you can talk to me. I'm not a SRO, but
Well, you are.
I mean,
you're
I
just
am.
not on the poster.
I'm
yet.
not. I am.
You actually
But,
are.
But people know they can come to me, and I have fielded so many phone calls from my peers that were on the fence about asking for help, and then they've called me, and I immediately answer it with, yeah, you absolutely should ask for help.
Have you been back to the center?
I have not.
In Maryland?
I have not. So I was supposed to go back for the 5-year reunion, the 5-year anniversary but COVID had restricted that, unfortunately. So
When I asked about going back, I didn't mean as a
yeah,
patient. I
no,
mean
no,
as
no,
an
yeah,
alum.
yeah,
as
yeah,
the
yeah. I was
first
gonna,
person.
I was
As a
supposed
peer,
to.
Okay.
as a peer.
As a peer.
Well,
Yeah.
I was supposed to go back and talk and tell my story since I was the first one there. We signed a ledger. I signed a ledger the first day I was there. It was like a book, and I've had friends that have gone out there for treatment also, and they looked just to make sure that I was there. In fact, the first person there, make sure I wasn't telling a story, and my name's the first name of the book. So I used to joke like, well, am I the most messed up fireman in the country? And somebody, it might have probably been this person sitting next to me, she was like, no, you're just the bravest one for asking for help. So
Again, it goes back to LFR. I keep circling back to the organization itself and the community in which we live,
Yeah.
that it is receptive and has the resources and the keen awareness to be able to say, we could get a better firefighter, we can have better paramedics, we can have better staff if we deal with what they're going through rather
Absolutely.
than ignore it or keep the stigma associated to it.
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, our union, our local 644, our IAFF local 644 has been pivotal in encouraging our members. Sometimes coming from kind of a different entity, it feels more comfortable. So they have been pivotal in supporting our efforts and getting people into whatever treatment center is available for them to go to right then. So
This is a good story. Thank you, Brent.
you're welcome. It's
Very,
my
very
pleasure
much.
to come and tell it, and it kind of helps me keep on track. I still talk to my therapist once a month. I have religiously since I got home, whether I need to or not. But this is the kind of thing that helps keep me on doing what I'm doing. Keeping my head straight.
Yeah, and thank you for being a PSO and all the others
of course,
and the growing list
it's
of
right
people.
here. That's probably the thing that I think is the most important about being a member of Lincoln Fire and Rescue, to be honest.
Yeah. All right.
It's huge.
We leave you with a good feeling today on LNK. I'm Dale Johnson. Thanks for joining us on LFR on LNK.